So I'm going to be taking a look at a game in Command Magazine number 19, Port Arthur. This game came out around 1992 or so, and it, even though the title's Port Arthur, it really covers the Russo-Japanese War from 1904 and 1905, or at least parts of it. Port Arthur is actually only one hex on the map, and Mukden is another hex on the map, so it really covers that whole period. I will say it doesn't include any of the naval in this game, although the Japanese on certain turns can use shore bombardment, but these are programmed in for specific turns. Now there's another game that I have on this subject called Tide at Sunrise by MMP, which I personally think is a superior game, although this one has merits. And I guess a third game that I have on the topic is from Avalanche Press. It's part of the Great War at Sea series, and I think it's called 1904-1905 Russo-Japanese War, focusing primarily on the Navy. So anyway, I'm going to take a closer look at this game. I do not think this is a bad game. I don't think it's a great game. It's got mixed reviews out there. The game basically is 10 turns, so it's playable. Each turn is generally a month long, although in the winter months, it's 2 months represented by one turn. So there's not a lot of rules to change anything for the winter months. It's just doubling the amount of time covered with the same mechanics. So that works okay. It's very elegant. The one thing about this game that a lot of people have a problem with is the not only the lack of zones of control, which works okay, but the strategic movement. So basically, you have a Japanese, turn sequence, reinforcements, movement, combat, etc. Then the Russians. Then there is a strategic movement segment before the next turn starts, starting with the Japanese and then the Russians. And what happens during strategic movement is that any of the side's units can move an unlimited number of hexes. This bothers a lot of people. But the rationale given by the designer is that since a turn is covering a whole month of time on this map, any of the units, if they weren't having interference from the enemy, could move anywhere on the map if they wanted to. The map is basically 5 miles per hex in scale. And so the range from Mukden to Port Arthur, for example, is only about 225 miles. So given a month to cover a terrain distance, that was believed to be able to be done, whether by rail or a combination of rail and pack animals and whatever else that they had. The limiting factor is that you can't start in an enemy zone of control, and you can't, at any time move into an enemy zone of control during that movement. Yeah, it could create some odd situations. I didn't find that the case, but I played solo. I played both sides the best I could. I recognized that I didn't want to use a gamey gambit type tactic using strategic movement. I kept it in the realms of what it was trying to simulate. I want to move a bunch of troops from Port Arthur up toward Mukden. So I move them, I move them up there. I don't use it to exploit the Russians up there and kind of put them out of supply or something. So that's the one thing about it. I had no problem with those rules, but it was a very elegant way to redeploy troops. So I thought it worked. Some people, though, that I know as acquaintances in this hobby had real problems with it. And I understand why, and I also understand that different types of game players are going to be bothered more or less by things like this. Anyway, let's take a look at the first turn of the game. Okay, so this game starts turn one in April of 1904. And there are several restrictions on turn one. One is that the Japanese have no reinforcements, there's no naval movement, and secondly, their movement factors are halved. Nonetheless, this will still allow the 12th Infantry and the 2nd Reserve Brigades to cross the Yalu River and outflank the Russian 6th East Siberian Division. The Guard and the Guard Reserve also cross the river, and the 2nd Division makes a frontal attack from the east across the river. You can see that in the picture. And the Russian infantry suffers a step loss and then retreats into Antung. And this gives the Japanese player 1 victory point. So in this game, victory points are awarded for enemy step losses and also control of certain geographic locations like Port Arthur and Mukden, which are collected each turn that the side controls them. The Russians have no reinforcements on turn one. There's also no rail movement allowed on this turn. So the Russian commander decides to leave the 6th Division with the 3rd in Antung. And we're hoping that this is going to force the Japanese to attack here and then divert forces away from Port Arthur and the Trans-Siberian Railroad. The 7th East Siberian Infantry Division at Port Arthur advances out into the hills just to the northwest of Dalny, and you can see that in this picture where they're blocking that isthmus to protect Port Arthur from any encroachment from the Japanese. There's no other help available here, so this is as good as it's going to get for the Russians here. There's also no strategic movement on turn one, so this is skipped. So the Russian player collects 4 victory points for control of Port Arthur, Liaoyang, and Mukden. And the Japanese have 1 point for the step loss. So the score at the end of turn 1 is Russia 4 victory points to Japan 1 victory point. This brings an end to turn 1. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned if you'd like to see turn 2. And I hope you have a great day.